morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's web seminar from Savvius about new ways to enhance your security investigations by having critical packet data at hand for very long periods of time, and this relates to our Vigil product. We definitely welcome you and thank you for joining. It's pretty much 8:30 on the dot, so we're just going to get rolling, and we'll let other people join as they find that they are able. Just a few points of administration before we get started. Everyone's on mute, and that's just by design. It's just a whole lot easier. Things happen when everyone isn't on mute. People forget, get on other calls, etc., and that disrupts everybody. So just for the ease of that, everybody is on mute. And if you do have questions or issues or anything along the way, just use the chat window. I'm not the only one online at Savvius. I also have another colleague online with me, Gabe, and Gabe can, between the two of us, but mostly Gabe can help if there are issues with slides not advancing or the audio having problems or any of that. Please let us know. Same thing with questions. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat window. If I happen to see something come up during, and I think it's relevant, I'll try and answer, but that's not always easy. I kind of have the chat window over to the side so it doesn't disrupt me too much. So for sure at the end, I will go through the chat window and make sure that we address any questions. And lastly, I'll answer this now because it's always probably the most common question that comes up, and I'll try to remember to address it again at the end. We are recording this. A recording will be available. All registered attendees will get an email with a link to the recording, and so that way that you'll be able to access it at any time. If you need to drop off or anything like that, definitely understand and know how life can get in the way of trying to sit through a web seminar. So with that, let me get started. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jay Botello, the Director of Product Management here at Savvius. And again, the topic for today is Savvius Vigil, which is basically an appliance that addresses what's now starting to be an up-and-coming area of security that more and more analysts and press are talking about is breach forensics. And that's very much the direction of the Vigil product. But before we get started with Vigil, let me just give you a brief introduction to Savvius for those that don't know who Savvius is. So Savvius, we're a San Francisco Bay Area company in Walnut Creek, California. We've been in business since 1990, so actually we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. I know not everyone has heard of us, and sometimes you think, wow, 25 years and we haven't heard of you. Well, maybe you've heard of Wild Packets. We were formerly known as Wild Packets, so we changed our name to Savvius within the last year to address our move about not just doing network analysis, but also this area of security analysis and specifically breach forensics. We have a large number of customers over those 25 years, over 7,000 customers spanning the globe, both here in the States and in the Europe, Middle East, Asia, Europe, Middle East, Africa market and the Asia Pacific market. And we've been in the business of creating high-performance products with insight into network performance issues, and with that, over the years, moving into security incident investigation as well. So our main products are two areas. We mainly have appliances, our OmniAppliance product line, which is for capturing network traffic and doing network analytics. And then we have software, and that's our OmniPeak line. And we use that to actually analyze in tremendous detail any of the packet data that is collected from the network and give indications through that analysis as to where problems are and how to go solve those problems quickly. Our problems, just like in security, they occur in a very complex environment. Remote offices, corporate campuses, data center, and very often you're really left wondering what is the problem. Performance, connectivity, content, And our appliances allow you to answer all of those kinds of questions. So like I said, we've been in business 25 years focusing on this area. And we go across all the different areas, so security, across platforms, across networks, across applications, so that you really get a single view. Just as a real quick example, one of the areas that comes into this is VoIP, which of course most of us are probably using this morning. And VoIP is an area of analytics that often is siloed out, and often people do VoIP analysis independently on a network, because of course those VoIP packets are running on a network. But very often it's the other network traffic that is impacting VoIP, or nowadays with the large amount of VoIP and now throwing in their video traffic as well, that all has quality of service set higher than my other data. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe VoIP and video is starting to impact the quality of some of my other data and the response times to my end users for some of that other data. So there needs to be a holistic approach where we're looking at everything at once across the network, applications, networks, the platforms, security, and that has always been the approach of Savvius. Just real quick, just a brief outline of our solutions. Many different appliances, our Omni appliances that are dedicated to Wi-Fi, and then Vigil, which we're going to talk about today, and then of course our software, several different flavors of our software. And like I said, 7,000 customers you can expect we're in all different verticals around the country, around the world, and you can see this is a representation of 6 different verticals, but we have a very, very wide reach around the world with our products. So let's get to the meat of today, Savvius Vigil. So we're introducing the Savvius Vigil. We have introduced it. It's been shipping for several weeks now. We introduced it a few months before that, back at RSA. And really, and this is the reason why I did that little, very, very, very short and brief intro at the beginning, it really does employ and leverage Savvius's decades of network forensics expertise and brings that to security investigation. So we've been doing network analysis and network forensics for decades, as we say. And, it's really that has allowed us to take this new approach in breach forensics. And we're going to explain more about that. So one thing that Savvius Vigil does not do is it doesn't prevent breaches. And there's very few products out there that prevent breaches, certainly nothing that prevents 100% of the breaches, otherwise they wouldn't happen. And of course, they are still happening all of the time. Because after all, the defenses, they become better and more sophisticated all the time. But, security is one of those industries where, it's a balance between spending the appropriate amount of money to get the appropriate amount of protection. And it's always a game of one-upping. So security products get a little better. Those that are trying to hack in get a little better. And it's a constant problem of one-upping. And we know that regardless of what kind of perimeter we put up, because of that one-upmanship, it's never going to be perfect. And there's going to be breaches, and there's going to be attacks on our networks and those types of things. So, and the breaches themselves, they're very expensive. So there's lots of different statistics out there around this. I understand that you've probably seen some of these statistics before. But, at least the stats on the left about compromises and how they're detected, these seem pretty reasonable and always still worth talking about, because to me these are frightening numbers. So 33% of the breaches are discovered internally, leaving 2/3 of them rely on notification by an external entity. And, that's a lot of the high-profile ones that we've seen in the news. That's the Target and the Home Depot and others where, it's credit card processing companies or credit card companies that are coming back and saying, wow, we're seeing, a very high incidence of fraud, and the common characteristic is that, all of these individuals who have been targeted have used their card at your store. It sounds like it would be a much more uncommon way to be notified, but it seems to be the common way to be notified. So that alone, just reiterates, from a very factual perspective, what I had just said earlier with those pictures, that, regardless of what type of perimeter you try to build, there are going to be attacks. And that's what drives the need for that breach forensics. So a product like Vigil and I'm going to do a demonstration here at the end. What you'll see is it's not at all designed to be an IDS or an IPS. It's designed to work in conjunction with the existing security equipment you have in place, not designed to replace. It provides a unique function in this breach forensics area that we're just not seeing today in the market with traditional IDS, IPS, and SIEMs. And more to the point of them being, the way they're detected, they're also, very expensive. Again, lots of different statistics here, but 27 days is the average to resolve a cyber attack, and that seems pretty consistent based on what we've seen in the news. And I think still a controversial number because there are other numbers around this as well, but certainly a number the industry has latched onto is attackers are in networks before detection for 229 days. Now, that doesn't mean they're have 229 days where they're exfiltrating data out of your network, but it's just saying that a lot of times the initial entry into the network happens well before we identify those breaches, and many times well before they actually start stealing things out of the network. Or have to find the right places, and a lot of times it's because they're also trying to operate slowly. These aren't like the attacks of old where people are interested in the flash and they're interested in being identified. They're not. They want to sneak in, be stealthy, figure out exactly where that vein of gold leads to, and then they want to mine that vein of gold. And they want to do that as undetected and as unobtrusively as possible, and that's why they're in there for so long. 1.4 successful attacks per week, and 7.2 million is the average cost per company per year for mitigating breaches. So what Savvius Vigil does is it works along with other network security and security products to make packet data available for security investigations. So a little bit more, what does that mean? So when somebody goes to investigate a breach, in the absence of packet data, network packet data, basically a recording of what's happened on the network, in the absence of that, they're left mainly with log files to go and try and piece together what may have happened in a particular breach. And though useful, because it's definitely information and more information than you'd have if there was nothing at all, log files do not provide a tremendous amount of depth in letting you know exactly how a breach was instigated, where they went, what machines were compromised, etc. The log files basically give you a list of all of the different security events that have been triggered by the IDS IPS. So there's definitely issues there. Those could have missed the attack in general because it's 0 day. Even instances where, because a lot of this data is log data, where data's been modified by hackers to cover their tracks. So the true data, the unequivocal data around that attack is the packet data themselves. So you can see exactly what transpired on the network in and around the time when that breach happened. Now, what's part of the challenge here? Well, part of the challenge here is that we just saw here, they may have been in the network for 229 days. Well, if they've been in the network for 229 days, that means I need to have packet data from 229 days ago. And if I'm on even a 1 gig network, but presumably nowadays it's a 10 gig network, the fact that we've been in the business here at Savvius of network management for the last 25 years, I can assure you that there is no system that's even close today in the market, and I mean nowhere near close, that's going to save all of the packet data for your network for 229 days. And even if it did, the ability to go back and mine that data would be a momentous attack to be able to go back and do that. So the challenge here is to be able to save relevant packet data around these security events and save it for a long period of time to make it available for security investigations. And that's exactly what Savvius Vigil does. So really with Vigil, there are 5 key assumptions. And, without these, if it's a customer or an end user, if you don't agree with these assumptions, then maybe breach forensics really isn't for you. But first, and I think everyone would have trouble denying this assumption, but you have assets to protect. There are certain things on your network, and for some customers more than others, but there are definitely assets to protect, whether they're financial, whether they're medical, whether it's just confidential employee data. There are assets that you have to protect, maybe by law, maybe just out of moral obligation, but certainly in many cases by law. Your perimeter isn't perfect. And I'm not saying that companies and enterprises don't make their very best efforts here, because they do. A lot of money and a lot of good technology goes into a security perimeter, but based on everything that we see, we know that perimeters still aren't perfect, and again, probably aren't ever going to be perfect, right? Because there's always going to be that one-upmanship game between those that want to hack into a network and our ability and our willingness to spend money to protect that network. Delayed discovery is inevitable. So our third assumption, and they get maybe a bit more controversial, but certainly the record indicates that a lot of the discovery is of a delayed nature, meaning that we don't catch the attack as it happens, or maybe we even do catch the attack as it happens, but we don't pay enough attention to it as it happens. We're not investigating each and every attack as it happens. So for that reason, the breaches are detected, many months later. And again, I know this one's a hard one to swallow sometimes, but certainly the data out there indicates that to be very true. Network packets are valuable. So, of course, coming from our 25 years of packet-based network analysis, that's going to probably be our first assertion. Network packets are valuable. I think those, on the enterprise security side, are really just beginning to understand this and come around to this, to see that network packets truly are valuable. But more and more, that is where we're winding up there, seeing the value in having those network packets, right? A tremendous amount more detail than if you have just log data itself. An analogy might be, car accident at an intersection. At the moment it happens, if you get the right, if it happens, there's a lot of information to look at, right? You can see the positions of the cars, where the damage is, injuries, all of that. Everything is right there for you to see. So though you may not have seen the accident itself, you're in a pretty good position to understand how that might have happened. But come back a week later, and all that's left maybe are some skid marks, some tire tracks, maybe a few pieces left of an indicator light over on the corner of the road that got swept or pushed over there, or a little bit of glass from or plastic from a headlight. That's all that's left. So you come to look at that, and it's extremely difficult to piece together the way that accident might have happened. You don't even know how serious that accident was. Could have been a fender bender, could have been serious. You really can't tell. And that's really that difference between having just the log data out of IDS, IPSs, and having packet data, a recording of what happened on the network. So these network packets are extremely valuable and extremely critical in performing a forensics investigation. And lastly, I made this assertion just a few minutes ago. You can't store all of the network traffic back for months. It would be petabytes worth of storage. Typically, because we have customers that do this for their networks, typically if you're running, couple of gigabits per second, steady state, spikes above, but quieter periods for sure, but a steady state somewhere around a gig or two of traffic, you might be able to get a day in today's very large appliances that have a lot of storage for packets. Nowhere near the amount of traffic or nowhere near the length of time that you would need to save traffic for to go back and do security breaches based on the other assumptions that we've put forth here. So there needs to be a smarter way to save that network traffic. So what Vigil does is it automatically extends that packet-enabled investigation window from that hours or a day perhaps to months. And it does that by doing intelligent packet storage around security events. So how it works is it all starts with your SIEM's intrusion detection system. So in the absence of Vigil for a moment, here's the typical flow today for most people. There's network traffic. It comes into some sort of IDS IPS processing as part of a SIEM, and the output of that is events. And that's that little screenshot over there, more to the upper right-hand side. Typical output screenshot from an IDS IPS showing a list of events, some red, some yellow, a description of the events, IP addresses that might be affected, etc. That's pretty much what you get. So it's going to generate those events continuously, maybe for immediate investigation, maybe for later investigation, and each event is going to include a limited amount of data. And depending on how you tune that IDS IPS, there may be too many events to investigate each one. They're typically, what we're finding is there are two classes of users out there. One, where they try to really tune the IDS IPS such that it's tuned to match the security team's capability to be able to analyze each and every event that comes through so they can determine if it is truly a breach or not. There are also others that rely more on the notion of the log data being the record, and they want to have as many events triggered as possible. And they don't look at them they look at the events themselves on a real-time basis, but they don't investigate each event on a real-time basis, and they use that as the record should a breach be identified. They can see, all of these other security activities around that, and they feel that those are the breadcrumbs. That's the amount of data they need to be able to go back and analyze those security events. But regardless to say, an IDS IPS can be tuned to give you a couple of hundred events a day to tens of thousands of events of a day, and that all depends on the methodologies behind the chief security officer and those that work for that individual. Once we introduce Vigil into the mix, you see we're certainly not replacing anything that's there already as part of your security system. What Savvius Vigil does is it takes the same network traffic feed that's going into your IDS IPS, and we take that parallel feed into the Savvius Vigil appliance, and we take a feed of the same events that are coming out of your IDS IPS, and we feed those events into the Savvius Vigil appliance. So there are two inputs into the appliance. Again, the network traffic itself and the same network traffic that's being analyzed by the IDS IPS, and the events that the IDS IPS are identifying as critical, or depending again on how you have your IDS IPS tuned, maybe just somewhat routine security events. All of that delivered into the Savvius Vigil appliance. We're able to integrate with HP ArcSight, Cisco FireSight, Snort, and Suricata today, and we're working on several others right now. So we'll have a little bit over time. We will be supporting pretty much most of the common IDS IPS capabilities out of SIEMs, and in addition to events. So a little bit more about the way this works. So what Vigil is going to do now, so it has the two sources of data. It has the packets themselves, the network traffic, and it has the events, the security events coming in. So what Vigil is able to do is it's able to do intelligent packet storage based on those events. So security events, as they come in, have relevant pieces of information. They have information about what the security breach is itself, information more specifically around the IP addresses that are taking part in what's felt to be that security event. So with Vigil, we're able to extract that information from the events, and most notably the IP addresses, and then save the network traffic for just those IP addresses and just for the period of time around when the event was triggered. Now, I want to be very clear about this point because, you know, this is an area where Vigil also differentiates itself. We're able to see packet data from before the event was triggered as well as after the event was triggered. And it's very critical that happen. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute on the next slide and explain that in more detail. But keep that in mind that there is a before and after. And this timing is critical. It's critical that you get some of the packets from before the event was triggered because there are processing latencies with IDS and IPSs, and that just makes sense. So a lot of times by the time an event has been triggered and an event has been delivered, you know, either to the dashboard for the IDS console or to the Vigil appliance, the packets that generated that security event have certainly already passed the network, whether that was 2 seconds ago or 10 seconds ago, 30 seconds ago, 2 minutes ago. They've passed by. So there has to be a capability to see the packet data from before when the event was triggered. And we're going to see in another graphic in a minute a little bit more about how all that works. So, and in addition to being able to trigger by events, Vigil can also continually save packets for specific IP addresses on an ongoing basis. Now, this does, decrease the length of time that you're able to store relevant packet data for, depending on the volume of data for that particular IP address. But if you have critical resources out there, servers where the credit card information is stored, or where the sensitive employee data is stored, or whatever, you can enter that IP address or a few IP addresses into Vigil and constantly monitor those resources as well. So I was talking a bit about the importance of being able to save packet data from before the time the event was triggered as well as after the event was triggered. And this graphic will hopefully be able to depict that. So what we have here is a representation of just 6, out of all of the IP addresses that could be on a network right now. And what we're looking at is on the left-hand side is really 5 minutes ago. And then on the right-hand side is really now. So we see we're now, and we see that in step 1, an IDS event came in that talked about an event that was going on between 2 IP addresses. And of course, that event is already a little bit in the past because of these processing latencies and everything else. So let's just say instead of using Vigil, we decided, when we see an event, we're going to start a capture, a packet capture for 5 minutes, based on that. Well, if we started it right now, we already would have missed the packets in the event, as this graphic shows, because they happened just a little bit in the past. Okay, with Vigil, we had that 5 minutes of historical data available at any time, so we can go back and extract those packets back out of that historical data, and then make a long-term storage of those packets. So we see the event, and then we're able to go back 5 minutes and look at all of the other flows, all of the other times when those 2 IP addresses that were listed in the event have communicated with each other. And we're able to go back and see that. And we're able to extract that data out of this short-term historical record and then store that long-term in the hard disks in Vigil and have that data available now for a very long period of time. And we can do that for up to 5 minutes before. That's tunable. You may not always need 5 minutes before. Our own investigations so far with security events and some of this processing latency, typically in the 30 to 45 second range is where you actually capture the packets themselves that triggered the event. And you still may want something, prior to that, because you may want to see what happened before the actual event. But regardless, we can go back 5 minutes. We can also, based on customer configuration, save not only the conversation, the flow between the two IP addresses listed in the security event, but we can also save what we call associated conversations. So now any conversations that either of those IP addresses have had with other IP addresses, we can save those as well. Those are represented in the white. So now we have kind of a hierarchy of data, so we can see, an event was triggered. We can see what happened for up to 5 minutes before that event, both for the IP addresses that were involved in the event and any IP addresses that those talk to. So we can build a hierarchy and have this stored for a long period of time to have all of the relevant data around an event. And then in black, what's represented there are just the packets that get ignored. And it's important. It's important to remember that we're ignoring packets, and we're ignoring the graphic, because we're only showing 6 IP addresses may not highlight it enough. But the black is important because this is all the data we're not storing, which means that we are maximizing our potential for storing this packet data for a long period of time, because there's a lot of data that we don't need to store. And instead of following the traditional network perspective of packet capture, where you would capture all of the packets on a network for as long as we can, here we're trying to capture the relevant packets for security investigations, for breach forensics, for as long as we can. So hopefully that made sense. So just to give you an idea of the number of days for which we can store events, store packets around security events. If we store for a plus or minus 5 minute window, which is the window we were just talking about in that other graphic, you can see that we can store maybe up to a couple hundred days. And this is assuming 125 packets per second per conversation, 750 bytes per packet, and then if we're dealing with associated packets, a factor of 8.5, so almost a factor of 10 more packets because we've gone with the associated conversations. And if we ratchet that down to plus or minus 2 minutes, we can save packet data for an extremely long period of time, as related to security events. In terms of events per day from the IPS, let's say you're just to pick a number. Let's say you've got your IPS tuned for 500 events per day. Well, if you have your IPS tuned for 500 events per day, and you're saving associated packets, and you've got it configured to save those packets for plus or minus 5 minutes around an event, we can save the packet data for 250 days. If we do for plus or minus 2 minutes around it, we can do it for 625 days. So an extremely long record of packet data, the critical data you need. Back to that accident investigation, it's like we're seeing the accident right as it happened, even though we're going back and investigating that accident many, many months later. It's like having a security camera right there pointed at that intersection all the time, but of course only somehow knowing to record when there's an accident. Very, very critical. So in terms of doing an investigation with Vigil, there's really just a few steps, and we're going to see this in the demo. So in our investigate screen, we're able to select and refine which events we're interested in looking at. So because we're saving the packets per event, we're also using events as the method for going and retrieving these packets, because in most cases this is what the security analyst needs to do, right? They want to go back event by event and be able to see the relevant packets for that event and be able to determine breach or not a breach, critical, not critical, and that we're able to do that. So you're able to select by date range and by IP addresses and refine by source and severity and other characteristics. And then we're able to actually export and view those packets. And you can do that either in our own analysis, with our own analysis software, or maybe analysis software you've written for yourselves that's packet-based, or other open source choices if you want to. So the takeaways are that packets are critical to effective security investigations. Again, this notion of breach forensics. You really do need a recording of that network data. The packets themselves don't lie. The packets show you exactly what happened on that network at the time of the security breach, whether that was 15 minutes ago because you're investigating these one by one, or whether that was 4 months ago because something did slip by, and now you're being contacted by a third party saying there are clear indications that that data from your network was compromised. Most breaches aren't discovered right away. So again, a key takeaway here: it's a tough fact to swallow, but it's the reality. Vigil is going to provide the answer. So with that, let me take 1 second to stop sharing these slides and to share Vigil. And let me just share one other application. Oops, sorry. One more time. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the main screen for Savvius Vigil. And as I mentioned, we trigger and operate on the basis of security events. So what we see in our dashboard there's really two primary panels. The top panel, where it says Savvius Vigil Appliance, just gives us an indication of how long the appliance has been, in operation for us, and what kind of capability we have in terms of storing packet data for a long term for security investigations. So you'll see that the earliest date that we have packets in this particular instance for security events dates back to July 7th. Now, I have to point out that this box, we're actually just running this software here on a VM with a very small amount of disk space. So our actual protection window is quite small on this particular device. Actual protection windows are typically going to be, kind of in a 200 to 300 day range. But because I have a very limited amount of disk space allocated on this VM, our actual protection window is much lower. But essentially, it would be a lot larger in a device in our Vigil appliance itself. This is not an actual Vigil appliance. So we can say our latest events were captured just today, just a few minutes ago. The total events we've captured, the events in the last 24 hours, and the number of packets. And at the top, we can see our maximum protection window. So it's 15 days, so we're at that maximum protection now. And then below that, we see a list of recent events. And this will update once every 5 minutes to show you an indication that we are still collecting events from IDS IPSs. And this is the list of events that are being used to trigger our packet captures. So let's go do an investigation. So we go over to the Investigate tab, And what we're able to do in the Investigate tab is pick a period of time from to date and time, pick a particular IDS if we know that there are particular events that we're interested in investigating. We can search by severity. If we choose to do that, we can type in IP addresses. If there are particular IP addresses we're interested in finding the security events around, and we can choose also based on protocol to do our search. So I'm just going to pick one particular event of interest to keep this simple, and that's this one that happened here on July 9th at 11 o'clock in the morning. This community SIT message flooding directed to a SIT proxy. It's an attempted denial of service attack. And we can see, like I was mentioning earlier, this is straight out of the IDS IPS. We see there's a source IP address, 10.4.2.28, and destination IP address. And what Savvius Vigil did in the background is back on July 9th, when it received this event, it used those two IP addresses kind of as a filter, and it used this time 11:00:31 as a trigger, and it went back and it saved from our short-term storage the packets between 10.4.2.28 and 10.4.58.15 and saved them into long-term storage. And the way we're going to see that and verify that is we're going to come down to this bottom area. We're going to leave it set to 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after. For the moment, I'm not going to include any associated packets. I want to see just the packets between those two IP addresses, and I want to open those packets in OmniPeek, meaning I'm going to save that packet file. When I click Save Packets, it is actually going to save a packet file related to this onto my machine, and then it's going to open it with our own packet analysis software. So I'm going to click Save Packets, and while that's happening, I'm going to have to go back up to, and I'm just going to go share my entire screen because I can see this is going to be a problem if I do it any other way. So share my screen. And I know that was a lot of blinking there. Sorry, because I went and shared my screen. But now that I'm sharing my screen, what you're seeing is our OmniPeek analysis software. Again, we have saved the packet file related to that security event, and we have opened it in our own OmniPeek software. And the view we've opened it up in is this thing that we call our peer map. And what the peer map shows is it shows all of the IP addresses communicating with each other. In this case, we only had two IP addresses, so the peer map is relatively simple. We can scroll over it and we can see what the traffic was. It was all TCP traffic. We see that as well. We can, from here, go to other views. We can go into more graphical views and look at how things have transpired over time. We know this was a denial, what looked like a denial of service attack. And when we're in this view, over on the right-hand side, over in this area, we see our expert events. And we do see that also from a network perspective, we see some TCP repeated connection attempts. We saw two of those. Which is probably what triggered that denial of service. It's not a large number, so maybe not so much of a worry in this particular case, but we can see exactly where those happened. And if we want to even go see the packets at that time, we can just simply highlight those areas and then say, rather than see the packets for everything, let's just go see those specific packets for that period of time. I put them in a new window. And now we can see exactly the packets that have triggered that particular event. So we see it's right here where that event was triggered, whether it was the TCP repeated connection attempt. We can see it started the packet before. It relates us back to packet 19. So we're already doing some very detailed analysis around that specific security event, and probably proving to ourselves that in this particular case, there's really not that much to look at, and that's a good thing. And in many cases, this is the way security analysts are using Vigil. They're using it to be able to go in event by event and verify whether or not a security event really is critical. And then even use that data at times to retune things to maybe get some of these false positives out of the mix. So we can see very clearly, how this is working. Now, also, remember, it was at 11:00:31 when that event was triggered, and the first attempt of this TCP repeated connection event was back at 10:58:32. That's a minute and a half before the security event was triggered. So again, another one of those reasons why those two key aspects of Vigil, the ability to save the packets from 5 minutes before and the ability to save that packet data for months at a time. Those are both critical elements, and we can see here exactly why that's critical. We would have missed this first TCP repeated connection attempt if we hadn't gotten the packets from 5 minutes before. So let's go back to Vigil for a minute. You remember, in that particular case, I did not choose to include any associated packets, but earlier in the slides we had that graphic where we have the ability to not only get the packets for the two IP addresses in the security event, the source and destination addresses, but also any included packets. So let's go back and do that. So we'll do that, and we'll once again save those packets. So it's once again going to save them, and then because I have the open in OmniPeak box checked, automatically open them in OmniPeak. And I'm going to go back to our peer map view for a minute. Remember that last time in the peer map, we had just a single line connecting those two IP addresses together, and now you can see it's a much more complex view because we saved, again, all the associated packets with those particular IP addresses. So now we can see all of the other conversations and what was going on at any particular time. Remembering that it was 10.4.2.28 and 10.4.58.15 that were involved before. So this is, certainly one of our machines that was involved before, and 10.4.2.28 is the other one. So, in the previous view, when we went and saved packets, it was just this line right here that we were looking at. But now we see in that 5 minutes, all of the other activity, that 10 minutes, 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after, in that 10 minutes, all of the other activity that took place and all of the other connections between those IP addresses and other IPs on the network. So, for example, if it had truly been a denial of service attack, we would perhaps have seen one of those machines reaching out to many other machines to do the same thing. We don't really see that here. So we're able to verify that in this particular case, this is probably not a security event that's of overly great concern to us. And that is still certainly one of the values of Vigil, not only to be able to do, breach forensics around real breaches, but also to be able to narrow things down and to dismiss security events that aren't real breaches. So a very key area. So lastly, coming back to Vigil, which is one last thing I wanted to show you, that was from our Investigate tab where we're taking a security event perspective on things. We can also come into our IP include list tab. And in the IP include list, these are 3 IP addresses that we have deemed to be important on our network that we want to capture the packets for all of the time. At any given time, we want to be able to see what's been going on with this particular IP address. And there's real value in this because now from here, we can go back and do a simple search over time for packets for that IP address and see those. But also, it means we're saving packets from this IP address in the background all the time. So even back in the Investigate tab, when we chose this particular event, let's say in the associated packets, even if the addresses from our IP include list may not have been involved in this particular security event, we'd still see those come up as well in that time window because we know this is a critical resource and we want to make sure this critical resource is not somehow involved in the security attack. So even from the event perspective, it's very important. But to show how it works from the include list, we're here and we can just we can choose this IP address, and again, we can just go back and choose a period of time. I'm just going to, I think it's already, I have it already set. This is a period of time from yesterday where I know that there are packets there just to make sure. So, and I'm going to open them in OmniPeak again, save packets, and of course it saved that file for me again. And what it's going to do is now we're going to go retrieve the packets for this IP address, and we're going to see this IP address and anybody, any addresses that it has communicated with in that time period. So I think I chose a time period of 10 minutes, of an hour. Okay, so here's our IP address. It was 208.85.42.31, and we can see all the conversations that it has had over that period of time. So we can see who has accessed that critical resource. And by hovering over, we can see that was HTTP, HTTP, HTTP. So we know that all access to that has been web-based access. Maybe this is an application running. It's a web-based application, and these are 4 users that have come in to access the application. But again, we can see that in detail, and then we can go to, again, any of the other packet analysis level views that we have within OmniPeak to be able to view that data in more detail. We can come, for example, to our applications view, and we can see that it was HTTP, but giving it a little more breakdown was really Pandora was a lot of what was going on there. So, and again, this is manufactured data for us, so we probably wouldn't be looking at the Pandora data from a security breach, but who knows, perhaps. Again, because we're doing an IP address, and we just want to see things that were critical for that particular IP address. So we can see it in that perspective. We can see it in an applications perspective as well, so we can see the server, all the clients connecting to that server, et cetera. So we can do very detailed packet level analysis based on our Vigil appliance. So just to wrap up one last time, let me come back to our slides. So again, just to wrap up, key takeaways. The packets are critical to that security and to that effective investigation. The breaches aren't going to be discovered right away, and the events that are triggered, by the time they're triggered, packets have already gone by on the network. So you need 2 key elements. You need, 1, to save packets from before the event was triggered, and number 2, you need to be able to save packets related to security events for extremely long periods of time, 6 months or more, to be able to go back in time and still have that view of that accident scene just like it was the instant it happened. And Savvius Vigil is what provides that answer. So with that, concludes the presentation itself. I am going to go look through the chat window for questions, but I want to take this opportunity before I even do that to thank you for your attendance and your time. I truly appreciate that, and as does Savvius in general. We appreciate your interest in us and in our products, and thank you for attending. So let me go to the chat window. I don't see any questions at the moment, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those in. And again, just as a reminder to those who might have joined later, this event was recorded, so if you missed any of it at the beginning, or you want to share it with a colleague, you'll be getting an email from us with a link to where you'll be able to find this event and the recording of this event, and you can share it and play it back with anybody that you might be interested in sharing that with. So again, I did mention earlier that in case anybody joined late, you were all on mute. So if anybody is trying to ask a question, verbally, that won't work. Please remember to try and type that in to the chat window. All right, well, I'm not seeing any questions, so again, wanted to thank you all very much for joining us this morning. Truly appreciate your interest. If you do have any questions, just feel free to reach out to us here at Savvius. You can send an email at any time into sales@Savvius or marketing@Savvius. savviusvigil.com, either one of those, and it will be directed back to me as the deliverer of this webinar, and we'll make sure to get back to you with the answer to those questions as quickly as possible. Again, thanks for joining. Appreciate your interest, and have a great day.